You know that point that you get to in any sort of growth journey in your life, whether it's like in your career, your relationships, your personal health, you know, your rest, where you're connecting the dots, you figure it out. You're like, okay, I know the direction that I want to go into. And then you hit this stage where you're like, okay, how do I make that a reality? Like, what are the tangible steps that I should start to take that will actually take these ideas from the ether down into reality through the actions that I create? Well, this first new moon in May on the 7th or 8th, depending on your time zone, is presenting this cosmic opportunity and window for us to start something new at the start of a new lunar cycle. There is just a lot of clarity in situations that are happening around this time where we are offered this opportunity to clearly see the actual tangible steps that we need and seek that information with very little friction. Hello friends, it's your girl Alina, your friendly neighborhood astrologer. Welcome to my tiny little corner of the internet. In this video, we'll dive into the top things to know about this upcoming Taurus new moon happening in May on the 7th or 8th, depending on your time zone, and how it will specifically be influencing you based off of your rising sign. And before we dive into the rising sign horoscopes, I am happy to say that I am bringing back the full and new moon journal prompts. So I will also be giving you journal prompts, and it'll be also timestamped in the video. Now, the number one way to support my work, as always, is hitting the like button on this video. And if you'd like an outline of this video and all of my future lunation horoscopes, so for the full and new moon, emailed directly to you, then be sure to sign up for my full and new moon newsletter that is linked in the description box below. And with it being in Taurus, while it will obviously be impacting everyone, it will be most strongly impacting anyone with planets or points that are between 14 to 22 degrees in fixed signs. So think Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, and Taurus. First up, with this being a new moon, let's set the stage and describe the general energy of a new moon. So new moons mark the beginning of a new lunar cycle, and they're considered the lowest energetic point in a lunar cycle, in that there is zero of the sun's light being reflected onto the moon. And this is a sort of cosmic reminder astrologically to rest, reflect, and understand that it is beneficial for us to rest, to take time to draw energy back to ourselves and not always be shining bright like we see at a full moon. And the moon in general is this astral body that most strongly influences our inner world. So think about our emotions, our intuitive abilities, think about also things that are going on internally in our body. So think about fertility, manifestation, whether that's manifesting an actual human, it's a very feminine astral body as well, but also manifesting things in our lives. And this is why you see many people doing new moon rituals, where they take time to really get present, get centered, reflect on areas of their lives that the current sign that the moon is transiting directly influences in their lives, and they set intentions within those spaces. And just as we see that the light builds on the surface of the moon, leading to its energetic peak at a full moon, so too can the momentum around intentions that are set right now also build. And considering that this new moon will be in the sign of Taurus, it's the sign that inhabits the second house. It's all about our finances, our romance. It's ruled by the planet Venus. So it's all about love, relationships, romance, connections. Think about love languages. Think about how you need two things to come together in order to multiply and grow in a lot of ways. But also think about how Taurus, being a fixed earth sign, is also all about structure, consistency, and how that is required in order to manifest and create things in our lives. And just as we are still currently in Taurus season, we're going to be entering Gemini season later on in May. I like to describe Taurus energy in the context of Aries energy, and that Aries energy and Aries season is all about new ideas. When you come up with brand new things and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And you're at that point where you're like, you kind of get clear on this new window. And if you think about it, a month ago when we had the Aries new moon and eclipse, that was this potent, heightened window, this cosmic window, really heightened because it was an eclipse, so an amplified version of a new moon in Aries, the sign before Taurus. And there were all these themes around what is this new chapter that you might be being called to look at and explore in some way. Like, what are these connections that you've been making that have been kind of leading you to these new ideas, epiphanies, or realizations that make it clear that there's this kind of like new path that you might be called to go down, or this new perspective that you're called to kind of embrace. From that context and from that perspective, when you see the Taurus energy in a Taurus new moon, it's all about taking all of that high energy, that newness, that freshness, that energy of like, I'm looking out for me. What about me? Like, what do I need? And we're taking it and we're creating more structure with it. We're taking all of that vibrant energy and we're grounding it with this fixed earth sign of Taurus through our practical, tangible actions that are in alignment with those intentions and with those ideas. And I've described this before of like taking those ideas in the ether and grounding them down into reality. And this new moon is maybe not necessarily a time for like being in action, but reflecting on what has and hasn't worked over the last lunar cycle, over the last month since that Aries lunation, and learning from that and creating some type of a clear game plan. Considering also that Jupiter is also in this same sign right now, so it's also transiting the same house that we'll be talking about for your specific rising sign, and also Venus as well is coming together in these very expansive, lucky ways. There's a lot of supportive energy if you want to embody that Taurus sort of energy and look at ways that you can create structure. Taurus energy also and Taurus lunations are also about our relationships and how we can give and receive in ways that are supportive to one another. It's also about not just looking out for number one anymore, number one being the first house, that Aries energy, but now there's two, in that like considering your more intimate relationships in that way. And also how, especially in alignment with these intentions, how can you ask for help? How can you give and receive help as well in alignment with the path that you might be feeling called to take, especially if you've been setting intentions for entering a new chapter in some way. I also want to note that Taurus also strongly rules finances. So there's a lot of energy around our finances as a collective around this time, and there's been plenty of talk about the grander economy, especially in the US and in the West, but all over the world, as we're still reeling from things that happened during, COVID and the pandemic and all this stuff. And so there's this window as well for creating tangible steps in terms of our financial health, our financial wellness, our financial literacy, and creating consistency in that space, if that's something that's you're feeling called to do right now as well. Something else that's pretty notable happening around the time of this lunation is that there's a pretty light conjunction with Uranus and sextile with Saturn happening with the moon at the time of this lunation, really offering these astrological themes that are offering a lot of supportive energy when it comes to change, making change, responding to change, and taking responsibility for things. Like, especially if we set intentions or made promises, for us stepping to the plate in that way as well. Now, a pretty notable transit happening around the time of this new moon is that the week prior to this, so at the time of me recording this and posting this, we see that Pluto is going retrograde and will be retrograde at the time of this new moon. Now, Pluto is the planet of change. It's the planet of control, power, transformation, death, and rebirth, and the necessary sort of shifts that need to happen within us, especially during a retrograde. It's very internal, in order for there to be changes, and also redistribution and changing and shifting of power as well. With all retrogrades, when any planet goes retrograde, there can be general hiccups or setbacks or stagnation within the realms of our lives that planet influences. But they're ultimately tied to karmic lessons that we're being called to learn. And it's usually almost like a stress test, where there's things that usually pop up, but only if we haven't learned that lesson or if we have been avoidant of growing. Another sort of characteristic of retrogrades in general is that there is a tendency for us to internalize things. A lot of what happens with the aspects of our lives that the planet influences, those themes go on internally within us. Really, again, this calling for internal reflection versus like outward criticism. Although obviously we're all going through it, so it involves everyone, but there's a deeper calling for us to reflect on what's going on internally. And so considering that Pluto is this planet that strongly influences power dynamics, our sense of control, the realms of letting go and the death of certain things. You know, death is scary, right? It's like completely out of our control. Rebirth as well is very scary, right? And there needs to be a death in order for rebirth. And considering that there's so many new chapters happening right now following eclipse season, you know, we're having a new moon right now, and Pluto being retrograde, I think that in general there's going to be some themes that you might start to notice around control and around power. And especially if you feel like there's been people who have been trying to control or manipulate or influence you in some way, it's going to become abundantly clear during this Pluto retrograde. And considering that Pluto is transiting Aquarius, there's going to be a lot of themes around broader control. So think the powers that be, think government, you know, higher up type spaces, and looking at what control looks like and also what equitability looks like, what the shifting of power looks like in the direction of the broader community, the broader body of people, broader systems. In general, Pluto retrograde, especially in Aquarius, will definitely be bringing about situations that are calling us to revisit our ideas of innovation and freedom. And also specifically, again, it has to do with going internally, revisiting where we seek control, where we seek to kind of domineer potentially sometimes, or where we're holding on to the past in a way that is slowing us down from evolving in some way, or preventing us from letting go and going with the flow in certain situations where we really need to. Like what comes to mind is when, you know, there's so many potential negatives that can happen in the future, right? But it's about focusing on what we can control and holding space for the present moment, and the fact that in the present moment, 9 times out of 10, things are okay. But it's this anticipation of the future that can tend to create that anxiety and dread within us. And a lot of that has to do with us looking for control, right? And there's going to be these reoccurring situations where we're being reminded of our habits, our addictions, our compulsions that have to do with us wanting to make things as predictable as possible. And I think that that's actually really interesting considering that this is a Taurus new moon, and Taurus is a fixed earth sign, and a shadow aspect of Taurus is overly wanting to control and being way too rigid to the point that you can lose out on opportunity. So there's going to be a lot of these themes coming up around the time of this lunation. Now, the other notable transit that's happening around the time of this lunation is when we see that the sun in Taurus will be sextiling Saturn in Pisces. With this type of transit, it really can tend to internally make us feel a lot more capable and energized to take on roles and take on tasks that are tied to things that we're responsible for, or lessons that we've been called to learn for a while, where we're like finally growing into something that we've been called to do, especially when it's involving the sun. You know, the sun is our sense of self, our ego, our identity. And so when it comes together in this very complementary sort of sextile with Saturn, the planet of, you know, growth, responsibility, restriction, maturity, when it comes together in this complementary way, it can really lend itself to helping us with our own identity and kind of realizing in a lot of ways like, oh, I am capable of kind of like stepping up to this. I am capable of growing into this. Like I am capable of honestly like learning the lesson that I've been called to learn for a while now. And that can also show up outwardly as there could be an opportunity being presented to you around the time of this new moon where you are being asked to maybe like step up at work or do something that's very responsible, very much in alignment with your morals, with your values, that creates ripple effects in your community and also within your reputation. It's an opportunity for people to also have a bit more respect for you as well. And also really more importantly, you having more respect for yourself based off of these actions that are aligned with your moral compass. Okay, with that said, let's dive into these Taurus New Moon journal prompts. You can find these journal prompts also in the video description. The first prompt is, what is an ideal or current routine that you know would be helpful for your mental and physical health? So this can be things like going for a walk, or maybe meal prepping, or maybe finally looking into talk therapy? What is a routine? So a reoccurring action that would support you in that way. What has been a reoccurring obstacle or lesson that you've noticed you might have been called to learn over the previous few years? What is your love language? And what has been the best example or memory of someone speaking your love language? And I'll link an article explaining love languages in the description. And finally, for this new lunar cycle, do you have any new or existing intentions that you'd like to set at this time? Okay, next up, let's dive into these custom new moon horoscope readings for your rising sign. Like I always mention, you're welcome to go to any sign that is any of your big three, so your sun or moon particularly, but I always suggest checking out your rising sign. That's just a personal preference, but I know that for myself and many others, they have some of their big three or a lot of their major planets all in the same sign, and they notice that things are more aligned when they look at that sign. So it's totally up to you. But I also want to mention that the very first annual Aura Line retreat happening in Thailand this June, we still have spots available. So if you have been on the fence and you're curious about this retreat, don't hesitate to click the link in the bio and talk to me about it. I'd love to chat and dive into everything. I can literally answer any question you have. So feel free to email me. We can set up a call, whatever you want if you're really interested in it. Hello and welcome to my Aries, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. This Taurus New Moon is really orchestrating and offering this window of opportunity for creating in a lot easier of a way, really tangible action plans within the realms of your finances, your career, your savings, and in general, what you value most and place value or worth upon. And this is because this new moon will be transiting your second house. All of these Taurus themes, you're going to be feeling very acutely, my Aries friends. And this can look like creating even the most basic first step towards developing your financial literacy, your financial health, and creating some type of a structure within that space. During this time, you might also notice some themes where there's these callings for you to place a bit more energy into creating a bit more structure and routine or consistency when it comes to what is your budget. You know, what's your plan for tracking things, maybe for taxes? The second house is also all about relationships and romance. So you also might notice alternatively that there might be situations that happen around the time of this new moon that are kind of pointing out the benefits that there could be around creating more of this like Taurus sort of structure around your relationships of the heart. So those are the closer relationships that you have. They can be romantic, but they also can be platonic, but a lot more of those closer relationships where you have those more heart-to-heart connections in ways like, how can I make sure that this is being reciprocal between me and these relationships? Or how can I make sure that I am consistently helping and co-creating a consistent and balanced space with myself and other people? That's a big thing that's happening right now. And I think that also for my Aries friends, especially if you try to collaborate around this time, especially when it comes to seeking help or also offering help within the world of finances or things that you value, that you place worth into, that you also kind of like indulge in. So think about your physical possessions as well. During this time, if you want to take those tangible, practical steps and kind of lay out a plan, there's a lot of energy that's really supporting you in this space. We also see that Jupiter is still transiting your second house as it's also in Taurus right now. So, it's going to be leaving Taurus in May, but around this time, it's wrapping up its transit in your second house. And so I think that around this time can also be beneficial. New moons are all about rest and reflection. Now can be a very helpful time to reflect upon how have you grown, expanded, and learned in some way or in some capacity when it comes to second house things. So when it comes to your relationships, your finances, material matters, how have you grown in those spaces? What have you learned during this time of Jupiter transiting Taurus? And based off of that, how can you maybe set these new intentions during this new moon to support your journey? We also see that Venus recently entered the home sign of Taurus as well. So it's also transiting your second house at this time. So we have a lot of these major astral bodies, these major planets coming together in your second house in a relatively complementary way. You know, Venus being in Taurus, it's happy in Taurus. It's ruling sign, you know? And so around this time, like there's just a lot of positive, expansive energy when it comes to reflecting on how you've grown, what you've learned, what maybe you've been called to learn within these second house realms. And based off of that, what are the intentions that you might want to set right now? And again, with Venus being in this sign, I think that there's going to be a lot of supportive energy when it comes to seeking guidance and help as well. But with that said, that concludes my reading for y'all, my Aries friends. And if you made it to the end, I invite you to comment 3 black heart emojis to let me know that you're from the Aries group and you made it to the end. But with that said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Hello, my Taurus Sun, Moon, and Rising friends, and welcome to your reading for this Taurus New Moon in May. So this new moon will be transiting, you guessed it, your first house. And so it's going to be offering you this really beautiful window that's orchestrating a lot of supportive astrological energy around creating structure, consistency. And what I mean by structure and consistency is like consistent support and consistent affirming and reinforcement of your identity and your sense of self and your conscious and subconscious views of what you are capable of, my Taurus friends. And this is because it's transiting your first house, and that's all about your identity, looking out for yourself, speaking up for yourself, and initiating things. And with it being in the first house, this is a very strong window for creating something new in your life, for starting something new in your life, for turning away from things that maybe haven't been serving you and really focusing not on what hasn't been working, but focus on what does work and focus on what you should be pouring your energy into. And I think that with this being this Taurus new moon, there's really this opportunity around reflecting on, especially over the last lunar cycle, but also considering that Jupiter is also transiting your first house, and it's going to be leaving your first house soon as it goes into Gemini later on in May. But as it's also closing its own cycle of transiting this sign, how have you grown? How have you expanded? What have you learned, especially when it comes to the themes of your identity? And what I mean by that is, what comes to mind specifically is limiting beliefs, your beliefs of what you're capable of, and experiences that have highlighted like, oh, of course I did that thing that I'm proud of myself of, because I know that I'm the type of person to try that. I'm the type of person to explore that, or I'm the type of person to do X, Y, and Z. And when you say those statements, I'm the type of person that reinforces these actions that you like, but also actions that you don't like. So during this new moon, it will be very helpful to reflect upon your identity. And I think that around the time of this new moon, 5 days leading up to, 5 days following it, you might have some experiences happen in your life that kind of highlight and make you pause and reflect like, oh, why didn't I go for that thing? Oh, it's because I preemptively told myself no. I preemptively said, you probably won't make it, or you probably aren't good enough, or you probably whatever. Or why did that work out? And it's because I tried, because I wasn't afraid to ask. You know, these are the things that right now, my Taurus Sun, Moon, and Rising friends, you're likely going to be called to reflect upon. And again, during this new moon, it will be very helpful to explore tangible, practical action plans and align steps with your intentions, especially any intentions that you might have set at, especially a month ago at the Aries new moon, or the new year, or the zodiac new year, and asking yourself, like, based off of these intentions, like, is there anything that's holding me back that has to do with my own identity, with what I personally think I'm even capable of or worthy of, or aspects of myself that I feel like I need to kind of hide? What aspects of that identity? A lot of these things will be coming up for you. We also see that, like I mentioned, Jupiter will be wrapping up its transit in your first house as well of Taurus, but we also see that Venus recently entered the sign of Taurus. So it's starting this new cycle. And so with Taurus, with Venus being in your first house as well, looking into your relationship with your self-love, with your self-worth, with your own value. Those are really potent themes and potent areas to be focusing on right now, especially if you want to do any new moon intentions, new moon rituals. How are you pouring into yourself? How are you supporting yourself? That way you can then support others versus pouring everything into others and then it's like you feel so drained and you can't then pour into yourself, you know, creating this overflowing type of cycle of abundance where you're starting with yourself. That way your cup runneth over and then pours into everybody else in that way. That wraps up my reading for you, my Taurus Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. If you made it to the end of this reading, I'd love if you commented 3 sun emojis to let me know, or comment if this reading has resonated with you, if you've noticed these themes that are tied back to you and your identity with yourself, and maybe things that you preemptively kind of limited yourself on, or also how much you've grown in terms of what you believe that you're capable of, and also fortifying your self-identity to a point where being around other people isn't going to influence it and change it and make you feel confused. You know what I mean? In that way, and also fortifying your identity around your strengths and who you are. But anyway, that's it for my reading. I'm sending you my love. I hope you have a beautiful and abundant new moon, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Hello to my Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends, and welcome to your reading for this Taurus New Moon happening in May. So this Taurus New Moon is activating your 12th house and is really offering this potent window of opportunity for creating more tangible, structured, practical steps that really support your spiritual and your mental health. Really think of healing, think of karmic lessons and how you're processing those things. Also think of triggers as well. Over the last few months, I'd argue 4 to 5 months, really since the last eclipse as well, during retrograde season, you might have noticed that certain triggers have felt a lot more acute. You've maybe felt a lot more sensitive around them. And during this new moon, 5 days leading up to 5 days following, you also might experience certain things that are making it abundantly clear the need to process, acknowledge, and face certain shadows in order to not let them be your weakness or your limitation anymore, in order to kind of take off these lenses and these glasses and these shields, these layers over you that have been preventing you from making deeper connections and from experiencing the world in a broader and deeper capacity. And these lenses can be tied to these triggers and these experiences that make us see the world in a very skewed and sometimes even biased way. And it's until we acknowledge the fact that we have these lenses on, that we have these shields on to protect ourselves in a lot of ways, that we have maybe these habits and these ways that we approach life that are a bit outdated and that no longer work for us, that worked for us at a certain point to protect ourselves after we maybe experienced certain shadows, but now we're realizing, oh, it's actually kind of limiting me and maybe it's something that's holding me back in some way. These themes likely have been popping up for you, especially during eclipse season, retrograde season. There might have been some things that have coming up. And during this time with this lunation transiting your 12th house, it being all about your spirituality, your mental health. Also things like escapism and wanting to avoid these deeper rooted triggers and shadows and uncomfortable feelings, especially considering that it's transiting this area, it's activating this area of your life. Now can be such a powerful time because this lunation is calling for us to do this, and it's offering us energetic and expansive support within this space, because we see that Jupiter is also inhabiting your 12th house right now. It's also in Taurus. We also see that Venus just entered the sign of Taurus, offering a lot more love, a lot more support, especially in our more intimate relationships if we seek for that support, especially because all of this supported cosmic energy is really offering us a very supportive opportunity if we choose to explore how we can create consistency, routine, structure, and an energy of groundedness when it comes to pouring into our mental health, pouring into our spiritual health, pouring into our healing journey. Really our healing journey. What does it look like to heal? What does it look like to hold space for these things head on, to co-create a space, whether that's with a therapist, with a close loved one, in a loving space that we can really heal from these things. But really, namely, the overall theme for y'all is, what does it look like to pour into your mental health? Hard. I mean it, like unflinchingly looking at things, and what does that look like to heal in that way? This Taurus new moon is offering you a potent opportunity for exploring these spaces, my Gemini sun, moon, and rising friends. And I think that, again, that can look like looking into talk therapy, journaling. What has helped you in the past really process and connect the dots when it comes to experiences that have left you feeling confused or feeling hurt or feeling like there's something off here, or feeling like there's something wrong, but I didn't speak my truth because of this, or there's something wrong, but I overreacted. Like, how can there be a balance? And how can there, and what I specifically mean is, it's not just about, okay, this new moon, I'm going to journal, I'm going to talk to somebody, this is great. I specifically mean, how can you create some structure there where you are continually, routinely, in a ritualistic way, supporting your mental health, supporting your spiritual health, and allowing yourself to transmute and process and release and move through some of the tougher, heavier energy that you've been noticing has been coming up consistently recently. And so, yeah, that concludes my reading for y'all, my Gemini sun, moon, and rising friends. If you made it to the end of this reading, I'd love if you commented 3 of those dream bubble or thought bubble emojis, and whether or not this reading resonated with you, or if you've noticed these things kind of building up in some way. But either way, and again, this will likely be happening 5 days leading up to or following the day of this new moon, which will be happening on May 7th or 8th, depending on your time zone. But yeah, with that said, I will see y'all in the next one, and I'm sending you my love. Okay? Peace. Hello to my Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. So this Taurus new moon reading is for you, and it will be activating your 11th house. So it's going to be offering very strong lunar support when it comes to exploring, really reviewing and intention setting around aspects of your life that involve your community, whether you are giving to your community, receiving from your community, maybe changing things up when in terms of your friend groups, your family, your broader community. Think of like clubs, organizations as well. Being in places where you feel seen, affirmed, that you're also seeing and affirming other people, and you're giving and receiving in that way, sharing ideas. And also innovation. And with this being a Taurus new moon, there's this very potent window of opportunity for creating tangible, consistent, and structured routines and aligned actions when it comes to these aspects of your life. Man, I feel like this is such a great opportunity for y'all when it comes to like innovation, approaching something from a brand new way during a new lunation, especially if you've made some clear connections and intentions around the time of the Aries new moon that we had a month ago, especially coming out of Mercury retrograde, eclipse season, and you're finally able to kind of connect these dots of sort of ways that you can approach things from a different way. You might have already noticed that. This Taurus new moon is a potent time for getting clear on that and creating a sort of game plan if you've been feeling like you need something like that, but really creating structure and consistency. And especially if you're someone who's been looking for friends, looking for community. Also seeing that Jupiter is also transiting your 11th house, and so is Venus, just entered your 11th house. You have very expansive, lucky energy from Jupiter. And you also have a lot of very supportive energy when it comes to your relationships. Venus rules the 2nd house of relationships, but also of finances. And so especially when it comes to asking for help and receiving help in your relationships, that'll also play a vital role around this time. So don't be afraid to ask for help, especially when it comes to, I feel like also what's coming up is like seeking help, seeking support in some way within your community, or finding the community for support. There's a lot of energy when it comes to that. So don't be afraid to really put yourself out there around this time. There's a lot of great energy, especially considering that we're post Mercury retrograde. It's, you know, communication is really building up, and our ability to communicate clearly and avoid misunderstandings. A lot of those things are very supported around this time, my Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. I also really want to highlight the beauty of having a new moon transiting your 11th house. What's that saying of like, doing the same thing and expecting different results is the definition of insanity? Like, that is a huge theme for y'all, in that you might notice through different experiences 5 days leading up to, 5 days following this new moon, where you're like, like there's a pattern here. I'm noticing a pattern that I don't like. And I'm noticing that a part of the pattern is me having a pattern of behavior that's the same as well. You know what I mean? And trying something new. And I think a lot of that will come through collaboration and asking for help. You might notice that also people come to you asking for help, or you might notice your community needs help in some way. And you might realize, I might be able to offer a unique perspective. But ultimately, there's this sort of changing of and shifting of our approaches to things, and there being so much support when it comes to starting something new, and namely something consistent and tangible, something that shows up consistently. And I think that literally could show up as like you looking for a brand new club that meets up weekly, you joining something that shows up weekly, you maybe even getting like therapy, or setting up a time where you're having a call with your friends, or a video chat, or like, let's go to the park every other weekend or something like that, where it's built in. And so you're not exerting as much mental energy of like recreating it all the time. It's more so, here's a new approach, let's lock this in, let's do it, you know, and it's something that's pouring into aspects of yourself that benefit from collaboration, benefit from unique ideas from other people, and that benefit in that way. But with that said, that concludes my reading for my Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. If you made it to the end of this reading, I'd love if you commented 3 tree emojis, or just let me know if this reading resonated with you, if you've been noticing some of these themes, or maybe if what your intentions might be based off of this sort of area of life that is most potently being activated for you and supported for you during this lunation, especially when it comes to like new moon intention setting. I'd love to hear it. But with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace. Hello, greetings to my Leo, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends, and welcome to your Taurus New Moon reading. So this new moon will be activating your 10th house. So think all things ambition, career, your social standing in your broader community as well, your reputation. And this new moon, because of that, it's really specifically offering you this lunar window of opportunity for setting intentions to really build momentum around, with a lot of astrological support, not just from the moon, but also Jupiter and Venus that are also transiting your 10th house right now, when it comes to creating tangible, structured routine and aligned actions when it comes to aspects of your career or any sort of ambition, or think of broader long-term goals that you have that are tied to maybe your identity or who you see yourself as in the world, and how you participate or contribute to your broader community. And this can look like, I feel like, especially 5 days leading up to and following this lunation, you might have some experiences where you might have some job opportunities, but you also might, it might be job opportunities, but it also could be tied to maybe you personally have this game plan of like, I have this 5-year plan, this 10-year plan, or something like that. And it could be you realizing, oh, I want to create a brand new plan. But it can also be that you already have a plan in place. You already know the general direction that you want to take. You kind of know what you want to do with your life in that way when it comes to those realms. But maybe you haven't been as specific about it, or maybe you want to get really specific. Like, what are my steps? Like, really think about what are the change-making steps. You know what I mean? There's so many little big and small things we can do day to day, but what are the change-making steps that are part of my action plan? If you want to get really clear on those things, this Taurus new moon is for you, because it will be a very energetically supportive time that will offer a lot of mental clarity when it comes to really laying out, how can I show up and build some form of consistency or routine that where I'm not placing all this mental energy all over again to figure it out all over again, where I can create a clear plan that I can show up to and just fall into the rhythm of in some way that has to do with my ambition, that has to do with my career. And in an external way, around the time of this new moon, you might notice, like I said, it could be career opportunities, but it could also be hiccups within these spaces, hiccups within the actions that you're taking when it comes to your broader goals that are kind of calling you to maybe question these things or really reflect on what has and hasn't been working in the previous lunar cycle, especially considering since previous Aries new moon about a month ago, if you set any intentions, what has and hasn't been working, or what are these ideas that maybe have been becoming clear to you, and in what ways when it comes to, again, like your ambitions in whatever capacity, how can you create consistency there in support of these ideas that you have? Especially, like, what comes to mind also is any sort of ambitions that you might have had at the beginning of the year, you know, a few months ago, 5 months ago now, the actual new year, the zodiac new year at the beginning of Aries season, which happened near the end of March, you know, reviewing those things and how can you create tangible consistency in those spaces. And again, Jupiter has been transiting your 10th house for a while now, and it's actually wrapping up its transit through your 10th house in the sign of Taurus. So also reflecting on the past of how have you expanded or grown, or what has maybe hindered those things when it comes to your career and your broader ambitions in life, and maybe your association with your social standing within your broader community, or, you know, things like that, even status. The 10th house is, you know, the house of Capricorn. So think about those themes as well. And how have you expanded? And based off of those things over the previous few months of Jupiter being in your 10th house and activating your 10th house, offering that luck, what has worked for you? And based off of what has worked for you, maybe that can inform you on the structure and consistency of the areas that you want to focus on that actually make a difference, the most difference in your life in that space. And again, like, it doesn't necessarily need to be this like earth-shattering brand new thing. You're changing careers, you're changing your ambitions. Not necessarily that of it necessarily being brand new, although maybe you have been working towards that. This Taurus new moon is definitely helping you usher in this new phase. But it can also look like, I know what I need to do when it comes to the broader strokes. You know, I know where I want to be by the end of this year. I know where I want to be maybe in a few months. I know that there's this event coming up or this thing that's coming up that I need to do that's within this realm of my life. But what are the actual tangible steps that are going to get me there, that are in alignment with my goals? Like the structured, tangible, real world, I can see it on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard, what I need to do, or who I need to call and ask for help on. We see that Venus recently entered your 10th house as well, entering the sign of Taurus, which it is so happy being in because this is its ruling sign. It's very happy in the sign of Taurus, Venus. And with it being in your 10th house as well, it can be very energetically supportive of you asking for help, especially when it comes to your closer relationships. There's something there that can be very helpful that's playing a role when it comes to these aspects as well. But with that said, that concludes my reading for you, my Leo, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. If you made it to the end of this reading, I'd love if you commented 3 mountain emojis, because something that also comes to mind is the book The Mountain Is You. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but I don't know. It just came to mind. I feel like some of y'all might benefit from it. It's a really good book. Just trust me, just look into it. But with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Also comment if you feel like this reading has resonated with you, if you've noticed these themes coming up for you in some way. But with that said, I will see you in the next one. Peace. Hello and welcome to my Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. This will be your reading for the upcoming Taurus new moon happening in May. So this new moon, this lunation in Taurus will be activating your 9th house of travel and expansion of your consciousness, expansion of your awareness, of your knowledge, of your perspectives, of so many things. And so with this being a Taurus new moon, it's offering this clear runway, this cosmic lunar supportive energy when it comes to taking tangible, structured, consistent steps that are within the space of like a routine, something that again is consistent, that's predictable, that requires less mental energy of restarting it over and over again, but really falling into the rhythm of consistency, specifically when it comes to the expansion of your consciousness, the expansion of your awareness. So think about learning something new, being a part of a class, diving deeper into current studies or starting new studies in some way. Maybe finally getting that book that is allowing you to better understand something that you've been interested in for a really long time, or that you've been called to understand. This will likely show up 5 days leading up to, 5 days following. There being some experience in some way that's really highlighting how beneficial it will be to you, for you to expand your awareness and your understanding of something. And this can be in world events. You might have noticed a lot of talk about things happening in the world in terms of wars, in terms of a lot of really tough situations, and maybe you don't really understand what's happening. And so you're like, I'm going to choose a bit of willful ignorance. I'm over here. I'm going to choose to not understand it. But now during this Taurus New Moon, there's a lot of energetic support when it comes to learning about it, getting really clear on it. Another thing that's really, really supportive around this time, my Virgo Sun, Moon, and Rising friends, is travel. And travel is such a potent aspect of the ninth house. You know, the ninth house is all about Sagittarius, because travel expands our world. It expands our literal worlds, our physical space. It changes things, but oftentimes it's very rare that we don't come from a brand new space, say a brand new country, a brand new state, brand new culture, or even subculture that we become immersed in, and we don't learn something, whether it's something about others or even about ourselves, that expands our awareness. And so right now can also be a very beneficial time to booking things, planning things, and again, creating tangible routines and structure within this space. Another thing that comes to mind is creating routine when it comes to sitting down to actually learn something. I feel like, especially after school, especially if you're out of school, we always associate the idea of creating consistency when it comes to sitting down and reading a book, or sitting down and watching a documentary, or sitting down and taking a lesson, even on YouTube for free, or signing up for an online course. We associate that with the academic space and forget that we can do that anytime that we want, and it can actually be fun and interesting. It doesn't have to feel like a chore. I feel like the academic space can oftentimes make us have a negative connotation with learning. And for my Virgo Sun, Moon, and Rising friends right now, it can be so beneficial to do this, because what it does is it equips you with better knowledge to then approach things in a more informed way and in a more efficient way. And considering that Jupiter has been transiting your ninth house for a while, which is being activated by this lunation, and Venus recently entered your ninth house, there's a lot of lucky expansive energy in this space. So a lot of Jupiter support with any sort of tangible, structured, consistent routines, like aligned actions that you take right now, especially when it comes to learning, but also asking for help. Asking, receiving, and giving help within this space will be very deeply fruitful, considering that Venus is playing a potent role within your ninth house as well. But ultimately, there's a lot of luck and energetic support if you choose to go down this path of expansion through creating some form of tangible structure. You know, I feel like also this has already become clear to you, but maybe you didn't really know, and you still don't know how to really go about it. But over the course of 5 days leading up to and following this lunation, it will likely become a bit more clear what direction to take. And again, don't be afraid to ask for help within this space, my Virgo friends. But with that said, that wraps up my reading for this lunation for you. If you made it to the end, I'd love if you commented 3 airplane emojis. And or just let me know if this reading resonated with you, if you've been noticing these themes coming up yet. But with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace. Hello, welcome into my Libra Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. So this will be your Taurus New Moon reading, and this lunation will be activating your 8th house. So it will be really offering this very potent cosmic and lunar astrological energy, really also involving the very expansive Jupiter's energy and Venus's energy, because they will all be having a party in your 8th house at the time of this lunation. But namely, this Taurus New Moon will be really offering this really potent runway and this opportunity for creating tangible, structured routine, like a really clear game plan, and getting clear on like what actually works for you in terms of like tangible action plans when it comes to aspects of your life that involved intimacy, involved diving deeper into your long-term relationships, as well as, you know, your investments. So that could be financial investments, but that can also look like the investments that you put into your relationships as well. Also, what can happen or kind of come up when a Taurus lunation activates your 8th house is that there's this opportunity to create this sense of groundedness when it comes to your relationships, long-term relationships that are turning into long-term relationships. And again, your investment. So think about how you invest your money. Think about your savings. Think about, you know, think of like the stock market or crypto, things like that. A lot of those things might be coming up for you right now. Again, this is also a Taurus lunation, so involving second house themes of finances, our money as well, but also our relationships. You know, Taurus is on the opposite side of the axis, second house of the 8th house. So I find that to be really interesting as well. But for my Libra, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends right now, something that can be very beneficial is, especially when it comes to relationships, if you've been noticing these themes around changes with relationships, restructurings, new ones popping up, things like that, or even shadows coming up within relationships. Right now, this Taurus lunation is offering a very energetically supportive and expansive opportunity for you to create sort of like a game plan or a routine or a structure when it comes to actually working on your relationships, rebuilding them, creating consistency, creating a safe space that feels predictable in a lot of ways, in the sense that you feel safe and others feel safe, and you're able to co-create a space on a consistent basis. Like, what comes to mind is setting up, you know, regular calls with people, or, you know, setting up a consistent time where you can come together and share space and dive deep within your relationship if you want to do that. But also, on the flip side, this can also show up financially, where there's this opportunity to better understand and create structure around, like, okay, I'm going to contribute to my savings once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks, every fortnight or whatever, at a specific time, and it's automated and I don't even have to think about it. Like, that's the other thing about consistency and routine, is that after a certain point of doing it, we are habitual creatures. Like, after we do it enough, it becomes second nature, to the point that we're not exerting too much mental energy, but it's still helping us in a lot of ways. And like I said at the beginning of this video, with this overall reading for the Taurus lunation, the aspect of Taurus, and when it comes to consistency, is that we're moving from this Aries energy that we had with the previous new moon a month ago, with this major Aries eclipse, of these epiphanies, these new ideas, these realizations for these new chapters, and we're grounding them into consistent action, right? And so because this is transiting your 8th house of long-term investments, those being investments financially, but also investments in your relationships, now, oh my gosh, also, I'm just remembering the full moon that we had that was specifically in Scorpio, specifically activating shadow aspects of ourselves. Now, for y'all, oh my gosh, for Libras, there's this really potent opportunity. Sorry if there's some overexposure with the video, by the way. Like, it's springtime where I am, obviously, I mean, in the northern hemisphere. So there's a lot of clouds coming in where it's like, it's gloomy and then it's bright, like it's a sunny day. So I'm just gonna roll with it. But this can be a really great time for setting intentions within those spaces. You also might notice 5 days leading up to, 5 days following, there being situations where either shadow type things are becoming very unavoidable, shadow aspects of others or yourself. So for example, think of like jealousy or anger or resentment. Think, you know, these experiences, anything that might come up within you or you notice is coming up with others, that we usually tend to hide because we don't really want to expose it, because it's like, I don't want to be an asshole. Like, that's kind of like, but oftentimes these shadows hold such deep information of, for example, with jealousy, what do you truly want? What's the underlying thing there? Or resentment? What is it deep down that you feel like you or others have been ignoring? Like, what aspects of yourself have been feeling neglected almost? Or what aspects of others, things that people are doing that really upset you, that maybe deep down you want to do? Or what are things that have been going on that where you have kind of abandoned yourself to hold space for others? You know, these are things that might have been coming up, and around this time, it can offer a really great opportunity for you to create an action plan where that can produce this consistent routine, these practical things that continually pour into your long-term relationships, continually pour into maybe your investments, your savings, your long-term investments, especially when it comes to like emotional investments. And also like pour into also transformation, some type of a change for y'all also, but namely some level of structure and groundedness when it comes to taking steps in the direction that you want for this new lunar chapter. But yeah, that concludes my reading. Oh wait, actually it doesn't conclude my reading. I also want to really highlight the fact that both Jupiter and Venus will also be in your 8th house where this lunation is activating. You know, Jupiter is ending its transit through your 8th house in the sign of Taurus. And you know, 8th house is all about Scorpio themes. So in Jupiter is all about expansion and luck, right? So over these previous months, where have you expanded and maybe grown? Or maybe what has hindered your expansion and growth when it comes to intimacy in your relationships, when it comes to diving deeper, when it comes to intimacy with yourself, in that you're holding space for not only the positive attributes of yourself and what you want to grow into and what you want to do, but also acknowledging the shadow aspects, the limiting beliefs, you know, again, these shadow aspects of yourself that maybe you push down because it's like, oh, I'm so angry at this situation, or I'm so hurt by this situation, or I feel kind of jealous, or I feel kind of resentful, but I'm going to push it down because like, I don't know, it's just wrong. It's just wrong to feel these ways. And it's like, okay, maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. Like, and even if it is wrong, why are you feeling that way? Where does that stem from? You know, what can be done to help you process it and move through it in some way? And with this being a new moon, all about new chapters, all about initiating these new things, what are some tangible, practical things that can be done almost like in a routine that can help you to routinely process these things? What namely comes up is therapy, you know, like especially when it comes to like facing shadows, but also I feel like couple therapy, group therapy, like, you know, asking people you know to come in together. But even outside of therapy, like maybe initiating or trying to create a space where you can dive deeper with other people to process something in a safe space that's co-created, but only if you feel safe, you know? The last thing that I also want to say with Venus, just entering the sign of Taurus, just entering your 8th house in its home sign where Venus feels happy. It's very benefic in this sign. It's always really benefic, but it's energy, the Venus energy of love, relationships, connection, and also intimacy is flowing in a very unhindered way right now. And so again, there's this emphasis on relationships and how also asking for help, really speaking up and really communicating where you're at and making an effort in that space will be very rewarded at this time for my Libra, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. But with that said, that wraps up my reading for you. I'm sending you all the love, all my love. And if you made it to the end of this reading, I'd love if you commented 3 question mark emojis. I don't know why, but yeah, for the shadow aspect, because a lot of times these shadow things that we try to push down, there's a lot of question marks. We don't really understand where it's coming from, but it's about diving into it and acknowledging it versus pushing down these uncomfortable or inconvenient emotions or these experiences or feelings that we have labeled as wrong. So we're, you know, it's maybe not valid for us to hold space for them in some way. And again, this also might show up in your external world with other people, where their shadows are maybe popping up, where they're maybe trying to open up to you about something to work through it, or vice versa. You know what I mean? Or maybe you're being called to mediate, it has nothing to do with you, and they're like, what's your opinion? But ultimately, 5 days leading up to 5 days following, these themes will likely show up for you. But if not the question marks, commenting 3 question marks to let me know you made it to the end. I'd love to hear if you've been noticing any of these themes. Be sure to, comment that in the comment section. But with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace. Hello, and greetings to my Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. This will be your reading for this upcoming Taurus New Moon in May. So this new lunation is activating your 7th house of relationships, agreements, justice, and socialization. And it's a very romantic house, but it's also really a house about collaboration, partnerships, and making sure that things are equitable. And considering that this Taurus new moon is really all about where can we either create structure, what has and hasn't been working for us in terms of our structure, but also like how can we create tangible, practical steps based off of what has and hasn't been working for us in the past when it comes to our relationships and what is and isn't balanced within our relationships. And this not only has to involve romantic relationships, this can definitely pop up within this space where it's like, okay, I am ready to kind of revisit where we stand. I'm kind of ready to revisit our agreements, you know, like the agreements that we kind of made about our dynamics. Well, this can show up as chores. This can also show up as like communicating our love languages. It's not just in romance, but it can also show up in our professional spaces, in collaborative spaces, in platonic spaces, in our community spaces, namely things that can involve like negotiations, contracts, agreements, and how we are supporting others and being supported. And with this being a new moon, there being a new start to things, an opportunity for stepping into a new chapter if we're open to it, there's really potent, positive, expansive, and loving energy within the space. And I don't just mean that just to be like overly positive. I mean that because we see that Jupiter is also and has been activating your 7th house, offering a lot of expansive energy when it comes to this 7th house, you know, world. Think of Libra aspects. So all things equitability, all things relationships, all things socializing, making new friends, meeting people, exchanging information as well. But also, I also mean that because Venus just entered your 7th house, and it's because it entered Taurus, and it's very happy in the sign of Taurus. That's its home sign. So it's a lot more clearly in imbuing in an uninhibited way a lot of the Venus qualities of love, of romance, of expressing love, giving love, think love languages, and that being kind of communicated more clearly. But with that said, now can be a very opportune time for, if you're like looking to start a new partnership 5 days leading up to 5 days following, you also might notice these themes in your life already, where you're noticing like, oh yeah, there's this opportunity to maybe work with these new people, or work with somebody you've already been working with in a new way, or reapproach things in your relationships in a different way, where maybe like the work or the energy exchange or that dynamic is kind of structured in a different way, or there's like a different approach to it in some way. And just know that there's a lot of supportive energy with making sure that your voice is heard and making sure that it's equitable, if that's what, you know, if that's something that you've been looking for. But also if you have people come up to you, you know, approach you and ask like, hey, you know, I noticed that I feel like things are a little imbalanced, or like, hey, like I feel like I've been left out, or I think, you know, maybe we would benefit collectively from there being a different exchange there. Be open-minded to that and explore that, because there's a lot of positive energy in this space. Mercury is direct now, you know what I mean? But again, relationships, I feel like especially 5 days leading up to 5 days following, but you might have already noticed these themes within relationships, collaborative spaces, where maybe restructuring could be benefited from in some way, but it'll definitely be highlighted around this time. And if you choose to set some intentions, or maybe make a new agreement, or make something specifically that feels tangible, that feels grounded, and that is like consistent, that when you set this intention or you do this new thing, you know that you're kind of setting yourself up for success in the long run, because this is a reoccurring routine meeting or reoccurring routine thing, or like I'm putting this in the contract, or I'm making sure that this is a part of the agreement, that things are equitable on a consistent basis. This could also, I feel like this could also look like for y'all something having to do with work, in like changing a contract, or asking for maybe even a raise of some kind, or something, but just reworking something. Just my point is stay open-minded to that. Don't be afraid of that. And just know that if you want to set any sort of new moon intentions around this time, looking at how you can create consistent, tangible, practical, structured routine when it comes to your relationship dynamics, approaching it from the perspective of like, how can I make sure that this continues long term in a grounded way? Like, I know, almost like it's on paper, like it could be on paper, but just making sure that you're on the same page with other people in your relationship will be very beneficial for my Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. But that concludes my reading for y'all. If you made it to the end, I'd love if you commented 3 balancing scale emojis because this is all about your 7th house, the Libra balancing of scales, making sure that things are equitable in that way, equal in that way, or comment letting me know if you feel like this resonates with you in some way, if you've been noticing any of these themes. But with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace. Hello and greetings to my Sagittarius Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. This will be your reading for this Taurus New Moon happening in May of 2024. Woo! Y'all, oh my goodness, you guys are really getting a full punch of grounding energy, of really getting out of the air. You keep your head in the clouds if you want to. Stay dreaming, you know? Stay open-minded to things, but really getting your feet on the ground and feeling like you have some level of consistency in your life in a way that works for you. Especially coming out of eclipse season, coming out of retrograde with Mercury retrograde season in a lot of ways, there's a lot of grounding energy. If you've been feeling like there's been a lot of chaos or a lot of shifts and changes in recent months, this Taurus New Moon is really helping you in that way. And I say that because it's activating your 6th house, which is really the house of Virgo, another earth sign. So it's really offering a lot of grounded energy, and it's really offering this lunar and cosmic support when it comes to creating tangible, practical, clearly understandable actions and routines when it comes to literal routines in your life, literal consistency in your schedule. Like, think of your actual day-to-day schedule. Think of your actual, like, what structure you have in your life, whether that's like structured relationship, structured support, whether that's like literally think of like, what's my eating schedule? Does that support me? What is my work schedule? Does that support me? What is my sleeping schedule? Does that support me? What nourishes you, gives you health, and makes you feel balanced? And especially 5 days leading up to and 5 days following this lunation, you might notice experiences or things that highlight this sort of opportunity for you to look at from a different perspective and approach differently those aspects of your life, of like how you pour into yourself on a regular, consistent basis. Like, and also like, what does it look like for you to have a schedule that protects your peace, that consistently pours into you, that consistently draws your energy back to yourself, especially like at night. We can have our minds going all over the place. Like, what does it look like for you to draw your energy back to yourself? Maybe not be scrolling and looking at the outside world, but maybe reading or journaling, or like having your energy in your immediate space back to yourself. That way, when you do pour into others, it's pouring over from your own cup versus you being depleted and trying to give the last drops to everybody else. You know what I mean? That's going to be a huge theme for you, my Sagittarius Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. And I feel like what comes to mind also is that I feel like there's aspects of like work and spaces where you need to be perfect, where you have to have consistency for other people, where you have to show up in a structured way for other people, it feeling draining or you feeling a bit of burnout. And this Taurus New Moon is offering such a cosmically supportive new lunar chapter where you can really build momentum. If you set intentions and maybe not necessarily immediately be in action and do all these new things like it's New Year's resolution, but really explore what hasn't worked for you in the past, even when it comes to some form of a general routine. I'll give you an example if you're listening to me and you're like, I literally don't know what routine looks like in my life. I've never had routine, because I'm that type of person. I have a lot of air transits. I'm all over the place. My attention span is all over the place. So a good example of this that has worked for me, like when it comes to this type of thing, is I started prepping my meals. So I make a big batch of like a breakfast hash once a week. And it has helped me so much to make sure that I'm getting whole foods and protein in my life first thing in the morning, which has supported my mental health, my attention span, my blood sugar regulation. And it's like, maybe I do it on Friday, maybe I do it on Saturday, maybe I do it on Sunday. So it's not like this structured thing every Sunday at 2 p.m. It's not that structured, but what it does is by me creating that routine where I get into where it's like, okay, once a week at some point, I'm just refilling this thing. It bleeds into and it nourishes and it pours into the rest of the week for me. And it allows me to pour into other things like my work and other people from a more grounded and balanced place. And in that same way of like meal prep, like what could that look like for you in an area of your life where you maybe feel like it's been very chaotic, or it's been like too much of your energy going in all these different places and not there being this balance within yourself. Like Virgo in the 6th house is very heavily represented by Mother Earth, and this balance that Earth has in things. And not necessarily, I feel like in modern day it's been associated with like perfectionism, but when you go back to the more traditional references of Earth and of nature and of this divine balance, like outside in nature, it's not perfect, right? It's not like visually perfect and pristine in these square boxes, but there's a balance there. There's like a natural balance to things. And it doesn't mean that every day at this specific time you're doing all these things, but it's about like finding some level of a balance where you can in a way that works for you. There's a unique balance to the Sahara Desert in a different way that there's a unique balance within the deepest parts of the ocean, right? And that balance works for those environments in their own unique ways. And in the same way, for you Sagittarius Sun, Moon, and Rising friends, there's heavy themes within that space for you. And there's you'll likely have some experiences that might highlight that for you over, again, 5 days leading up to, 5 days following the date of this lunation, and opportunities for you to pour into yourself in that way. Oh, sorry. Last thing that I want to say is that we see that both Jupiter and Venus will also be transiting and activating your 7th house with Jupiter, not 7th house, your 6th house, with Jupiter actually nearing the end of its transit through your 6th house. So nearing the end of its really this imbuing a lot of luck and expansion within this space. So it can also be very helpful to reflect upon how far you've come when it comes to creating structure in your life. Like what luck maybe have you had already within the 6th house realm of your life? And also maybe what are things that might have hindered growth? And based off of that, that can also inform the direction you might want to go when it comes to setting these new intentions within this space. We also see that Venus recently entered the sign of Taurus, recently entered your 6th house. So it's also offering very benefic energy when it comes to your relationships. And so I feel like also asking for help can be very beneficial around this time, especially in your closer relationships, considering Venus's role around this time as well. But with that said, if you made it to the end of this reading, I would love if you commented 3 globe or like 3 earth emojis to represent Mother Earth and the balance there that maybe isn't always perfect, but it's there in its own divine way. But with that said, I will, oh my God, I'm like going all over the place. But if you don't want to comment that, I'd love to hear if this reading resonated with you in any way. With that said, I will leave you with my favorite quote, and that is, be gentle with yourself, because life is about the journey and not the destination. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Hello and welcome, my Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. Welcome to your Taurus New Moon reading for this lunation that's happening in May of 2024. This lunation is really activating your 5th house of your inner child, your expression, how your courage shows up, how you express yourself, and also your creativity. And with this being a Taurus New Moon, it's really offering a lot of lunar cosmic energy in a very supportive way when it comes to creating consistent, tangible routine, when it comes to supporting your self-expression, your creativity, and speaking up for yourself in a lot of ways. And I feel like 5 days leading up to, 5 days following the day of this lunation, you might have experiences or notice some themes that really highlight for you maybe like this calling to create a structured approach to your creativity. So that can look like realizing I need to like really set aside some time, maybe once a week, every other week, once a month, where I am a part of a group that inspires me. I participate in a hobby or like with a group or by myself, something that really nourishes and supports my own inner child. You know what I mean? And your inner child also, that also could be realizing that you've been hiding away aspects of yourself in some way. And through having like this structured, grounded approach with this Taurus energy for this new moon, being able to more clearly see how you can hold space for those things. And I feel like another thing that could show up for y'all is finally having some courage to speak up for yourself. And I feel like also what comes to mind specifically is like people pleasing and putting your needs and like not utilizing any courage whatsoever in the past in some area of your life, and realizing I need to consistently show up for myself. I need to, like, how can I consistently show up for and speak up for what I'm truly feeling, and also recognize that speaking up not only helps me, but it also shows what's possible for other people. It also sets a precedent for other people to also show up and also ask for what they need and advocate for themselves in some way. And I think that also with this being in your fifth house, another aspect of the fifth house is also having courage to stand up for other people, speak up for other people, take a leadership position in that you're looking out for not just yourself, but others. Overall, this Taurus lunation is offering a very potent cosmic window for how can you consistently do that? How can you consistently hold space for your inner child, hold space for, and what I mean by hold space for is like allowing yourself to explore maybe your cringe side, maybe like your more silly side, maybe what are aspects of your inner child maybe that you kind of pushed down because society told you this or that about it, or you didn't want to be labeled some derogatory thing for whatever reason. Like it's really aspects of your true self that's unfiltered, and or for others, you know what I mean, like their true selves, and how can you support them or yourself in that way in a consistent way. So what comes to mind is, for example, say if it's like a people pleaser type thing, or that's just what's coming up, but say if it's something that has to do with putting your needs behind something else, or like pushing down what you want to truly say consistently. You could have some type of a regular exercise, or maybe through therapy where you're talking about it, or maybe regularly checking in with yourself and asking like, did I really want to do that, or did I do that to make them happy, or to be accepted, or to make them seem like I am likable, or to be malleable and assimilate to what's going on right now, you know, to just be a part of the pack and explore what it looks like for you to be true to yourself. We also see that both Jupiter and Venus are also activating your fifth house. Jupiter has been transiting and offering a lot of expansive, lucky energy to aspects of your fifth house realms, of your inner child, of your creativity, of your self-expression, of activating your courage. So it can also be very helpful. And also Jupiter is really ending its transit in that sign. It's going to be entering Gemini pretty soon and leaving your fifth house. So it'll be really helpful to also reflect upon how have you expanded and grown when it comes to stepping into your courage and holding space for what you truly feel and what your inner child feels, and your creativity, and allowing that expression to flow unfiltered, you know, and just not being afraid to be seen as well. Like in what ways have you expanded over the previous months, but also how has there been anything that has hindered that expansion? And reflecting on these things can help inform the intentions that you set for this new moon if you want to do that. We also see that Venus recently entered your fifth house and is recently imbuing very supportive, romantic relationship, and even like financial sort of energy in an expansive way in your fifth house now that it recently entered it, because Venus is really at home in Taurus. So seeing that Venus, the moon, the sun, and Jupiter all in these in this fifth house, there's a lot of energy, and a lot of it is very expansive and unhindered. There's not a lot of challenging aspects here. So if you want to set intentions in this space, there's a lot of supportive energy there for you, my Capricorn friends. But with that said, that concludes my reading for y'all. If you made it to the end of this reading, I'd love if you commented 3 sun emojis, because we are shining bright, okay? We are nourishing and imbuing and really offering energy to others just by being ourselves, just by showing up courageously how we feel to show up. So really think about the benefits of that. You know, but obviously there's shadow sides to all of this. There can be negative associations with the 5th house, which has to do with Leo, of like taking up too much space. And a lot of times that's why a lot of us close up and hide aspects of ourselves, because we don't want to be perceived that way. But there are also a lot of benefits to showing up truly as yourself. A great example, I'm sure you know somebody who shows up confidently, who just shows up just as themselves. And you know, sometimes they rub some people the wrong way, but ultimately you're around them and you feel so activated, you feel so inspired. You're like, because by them giving themselves permission to be who they are, you see just by example of them that it's safe for you to do the same thing. So and then also another aspect of Leo is that leadership aspect, in that when you are courageous and you're holding space for yourself, you're also leading in certain ways. And that's a huge quality of leadership as well, is making sure that other people feel safe to show up as themselves. So anyway, also, if you don't want to comment the emojis, or if you already did, I'd love if you commented letting me know if you've noticed any of these themes in your life, how that has shown up for you in some way. But with that said, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace. Hello and welcome into my Aquarius Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. This will be your reading for this upcoming Taurus New Moon. Now, this lunation will be activating your 4th house of your more intimate, private life. Think about your sanctuary, your home, your more intimate family, your more immediate friends, your closer knit relationships and sort of community dynamics. And with this being a Taurus new moon, you will likely have these experiences 5 days leading up to, 5 days following, the day of most potently, but you might have already noticed these themes of maybe there's been like a bit of chaos in your life, or like there's been maybe a shakeup or change in your more immediate spaces. But this Taurus new moon is offering very grounded, structured energy when it comes to creating consistent routine and tangible aligned actions, when it comes to creating and co-creating a safe space. So think about nesting maybe in your home, especially if you've moved or something like that, or there's been a shift or a change in your life, and you're just like, or there's been again like change and chaos and stuff, especially coming out of eclipse season and retrograde season. There's a lot of energetic support when it comes to creating safe spaces. Not just physically. So think about your sanctuary, your physical home. Where do you go for refuge when the world is crazy? But also, who do you go to for refuge when the world is crazy? Who is your more immediate family, your more immediate friends, and what is going on in those spaces, and how can you how can you create consistency, especially when it comes to safety, security, and love. And just like safe love, gentle love within your more immediate spaces. And I feel like leading up to around the time of this lunation, this can show up as having experiences where maybe there's things that are maybe off in a family dynamic, or there's something new and fresh and good going on. Maybe you're meeting new people, or somebody's coming into the fold as well. But ultimately, you're having these experiences where you're realizing, oh, it would be pretty beneficial to create some type of consistent structure when it comes to having a safe space for me to just decompress, you know, and for others to co-create that for others. But ultimately, there's a lot of supportive energy when it comes to relaxing and creating, even like, I feel like it might show up as also establishing certain boundaries to protect your sanctuary, to protect your energy. You know what I mean? To protect your emotional and a spiritual space. And I say that because the 4th house, you know, that's the house of Cancer. Cancer is represented by the crab or the lobster. And both of those animals are this representation of Cancer, because there's these huge themes about protection and boundaries, like these shells that protect you and your energy and your emotions and how you feel and things like that. And so again, and also considering that we've had Jupiter transiting your 4th house, it's been transiting it for months now. So there's been a lot of lucky, expansive energy within this space for a while. So it can also be helpful to reflect upon, in what ways have you grown when it comes to your family, your more immediate community, and your social standing within your more immediate friend groups and people that you really care about, that you see on a regular basis. And also maybe what has been hindering that growth. And based off of that reflection, it can help to inform you in terms of any sort of intentions that you want to set when it comes to creating a more grounded, consistent, predictable, safe environment, whether that's a physical environment or, again, with your relationships. We also see that Venus recently entered your 4th house. So, and it's in the sign of Taurus, so it's really imbuing in a very unhindered way, because Venus in Taurus, it's in its home sign. It's helping to imbue a very clear, supportive energy when it comes to your relationships. So again, also asking for help when it comes to these areas will be very beneficial, my Aquarius, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. But with that said, that concludes my reading for you, and I am sending you my love. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you made it to the end, I would love if you commented 3 crab emojis to let me know that you did, or just comment letting me know if this reading resonated with you. But with that said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Hello, hello, greetings to my Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. This will be your reading for the upcoming Taurus New Moon. So this lunation we see is activating your 3rd house of communication, information exchange. It's really the house of intellect and all things out of air. So think about even like short-term travel and the internet. And by the way, if you notice light changing, it is the springtime out here, so we have like some pretty heavy clouds. So sometimes it's really sunny. See the lights going down now. Sometimes it's really sunny. It's like a bright sunny day, and then the next minute it's gloomy. So it is what it is. With this Taurus New Moon activating your 3rd house in this way, you'll likely experience, especially 5 days leading up to 5 days following, themes that have to do with your communication, learning, think of also networking and making more intellectual connections. Think of like kindred spirits, like you go out and meet people, whether that's at work or you go to a mixer, or you go to a new club or a new social gathering, or you're connecting with a friend and you just feel like really seen and heard, you know? You're able to exchange ideas, and it's very, this new moon will be very mentally stimulating for you in that way, especially when it comes to if you want to set any new intentions. It'll be so helpful to do research, do your due diligence, because you will be finding really great gems if you decide to like do a deep dive and learn a bit more before you set new intentions in some way. We also see that because this is a Taurus new moon, there's a lot of energetic support when it comes to setting tangible, practical, and even really visible routines and structured aligned steps in alignment with aspects of your life that involve communicating and learning, really learning. Again, this is the house of the intellect and of information exchange, all things out of air. So especially if you've been like wanting to do a deep dive into something, you've been called to maybe expand your understanding of something, especially I feel like 5 days leading up to 5 days following, there's that. The 3rd house is also a very social sign for the reason that it's all about information exchange, learning. So whether that's more independent, learning something new, doing your own research online, it could also show up as going to some sort of gathering or asking your professor or teacher or somebody who knows more than you information. There's a lot of expansive, supportive energy if you decide to do that. Like if you decide to go down that path, you won't regret it. There's going to be a lot of, there's definitely going to be fruitful results from doing that around this time. And when it comes to creating consistency, that can also look like there being maybe even opportunities to go to a club, to even join a class, or even like a workshop. It could be like a, you know, not necessarily like a long-term workshop, but even doing something where you learn something new, or even like a new skill that really helps to support you in your life in some way. And ultimately, if you decide to make intentions and you decide to create some type of a routine or structure, really utilizing that Taurus Earth energy for this new moon, this new lunar cycle will really help to build momentum and support you in that space. We also see that Jupiter has already been transiting your 3rd house of communication and of information exchange and of learning for a while now, for quite a few months. It's actually near the end of its transit through your 3rd house. It'll be leaving the sign of Taurus soon. And so if you want to also reflect on how have you grown in terms of learning and in terms of expanding your understanding of something, and what sort of luck has maybe popped up in that space, and also maybe what has hindered any sort of growth. If you decide to kind of reflect and look into that space, it'll really inform any sort of intentions that you want to set for this lunation with that foundational understanding of yourself and your relationship with those third house realms of your life. Finally, we also see that Venus also just entered your third house, entered the sign of Taurus, where that's its ruling sign. Venus is very happy in the sign of Taurus. So it's also offering very helpful energy when it comes to, especially if you want to ask for help, especially in your more intimate, closer relationships. And also when it comes to matters of money and finance, there's a lot of energy within that space. So especially when it comes to learning new things, do not be afraid to ask for help. Do not be afraid to reflect on, what are my strengths when it comes to learning? Like, what have I already been learning? Like, what helps me? Like, what's the form of learning that really helps me? Is it like being out there and doing something physical to learn? Or is it doing a deep dive online, a hyperfixating on something for a bit? Is it, having one-on-one sessions with somebody or something like that? But ultimately, creating some type of routine, you might notice how beneficial it could be to create consistency and sort of a more grounded approach when it comes to learning something that can really help you in the long run. But that concludes my reading for you, my Pisces Sun, Moon, and Rising friends. If you made it to the end of this, I would love if you commented 3 wind emojis, because the third house, is ruled by Mercury. It's the house of all things air. Comment 3 wind emojis, or comment to let me know if this resonated with you. But either way, I will see you in the next one. I'm sending you my love, and yeah, peace.